Hello everyone and welcome to another Cod-Past. We're on number 5, if you can believe it. I'm surprised that this has managed to gain as much attention as it has. For those of you not familiar with these videos, they're here to mostly discuss things related to the channel and discuss video stuff and some of your comments and yada yada yada, that kind of thing. Generally a filler between videos and, really adding glue to the whole channel, as it were. In this video, it's mostly audio, so you're welcome to turn off to something else and, play a video game, read a book, or whatever. I intend these to be more like background noise, as I enjoy background noise when I'm working or studying, so I hope I can provide the same for you. Anyway, straight to the main points. Today, I would like to thank very, very much a whole bunch of people who have started supporting me on Patreon. The Patreon thing was suggested mostly as a recommendation by a few people that I know who said, basically, all the cool kids are doing this, you should too. And I thought, okay, why not? And lo and behold, I'm surprised that some of you actually found my work to be of sufficient value that you're willing to support me directly like that. So, really, thank you very much. I cannot overstate how much you just validate what it is that I'm doing here. So thank you guys. Specifically, I would like to thank all three of you in turn. Savannah Raymer, Eliza Apper, and Doggett Woofsalot. The three of you have really given me quite a lot of validation, and I really appreciate what it is that you've decided to do for me. Thank you so much. I hope that the content meets your standards. On that note though, there is probably going to be a few changes to the reward system on Patreon, simply because I feel that the rewards that I'm offering are far too generic. They're things that basically everybody does, and I would like to provide some additional incentives for anybody interested in doing Patreon support. I'm speaking presently with my artist to try and see if I can make t-shirts or something along those lines related to the creatures that we've been discussing, or maybe even some of the other things like the tea ceremonies that I've done, and hopefully that might interest some of you and we could come to some kind of arrangement, but that's still some ways down the way, so don't look forward to that anytime soon, at least until I have more word on it. I probably shouldn't be announcing it right now, but I want everybody to know that I do have plans to expand things with regards to the channel. As for everything else, well, let's go straight to the comments. Our first comment comes from Victoria Mephistopheles, who says that it's great to see a more detailed video on fairies than what we usually find. And I must say that I actually quite agree. This was very fun for me to do, and I had this story thingy planned for quite a while. That is to say, the script for the fairies. And I spent a lot of time thinking of how I would present it, because the most difficult part about this video was trying to figure out how to introduce the Seelie Court as the core of the fairy society, without actually doing the history part of the fairies first. I thought it would be quite confusing to present fairies and, have a stereotypical fairy logo, and then suddenly start talking about fairies as though it includes goblins, elves, dwarves, nanny, that kind of thing. So it was a bit of a gamble in the way that I set up this video, but for the most part people seem to have enjoyed it and found it quite entertaining. So I'm quite glad that you enjoyed it. Our next comment is from Litzar Zadix. That's a lot of consonants, my dear friend. And Litzar asks me to do a bedlam. I'm not entirely sure what you mean by that. I can only think that you want me to go to an asylum and do a video about that, or generally do asylum videos, in which case, I guess I could, but I'm not entirely sure how this is related to the mermaid video in which you commented, unless I don't actually know what a bedlam is in this context, so please do enlighten me, because I really have no idea what else you could mean. Unless you want me to cause chaos, in which case I very well could do that. Ironically enough, a few months ago I went myself and visited the suicide forest and here in Japan and did a whole video thing. I didn't find any dead people though, but it's quite ironic that that recently became an issue with that one guy. So yes, I could do bedlam if I was I don't know if I had a weaker sense of self-preservation than that gentleman. Incidentally, I do highly recommend that you guys go to that forest. It's quite peaceful. I walked for about, 14 kilometers and found a lake. Alas, on that day, Mount Fuji had clouds all over it, so I really couldn't see it, and the forest was the next best thing. So, there you go. I think there might have been wild animals in the forest because there was something rustling in the bushes. My friends and I trundled about for a while before getting bored and leaving. But generally it was a nice place. I would recommend probably having a picnic there if it weren't for the fact that, people kind of want to kill themselves. So, there you go, Bedlam. The next comment is from Ali Garosa. She mentions that instead of saying biblical, I could say mythical, that Christianity is also a myth. Personally, I should say that I'm not particularly concerned either way. My interaction with these materials is rather platonic. So I do want to make that clear right off the bat. But in addition to that, when I say biblical rather than mythical, I'm being rather specific as to the origin. Whether you feel that biblical is more myth or however you want to put it, that's absolutely fine. But mythical would then include necessarily all the myths of the world, whereas I'm being specific as to one particular origin, which is the Abrahamic religion. Again, it's not... I don't feel either way about it, but I do hope that that clarifies why I chose that word specifically. Because this creature does exist within Islam and Judaism, as you can see from the videos, but it also is kind of mostly presented, at least to myself, through the Christian Bible, and therefore I chose biblical. Now, biblical is also something that is a useful shorthand for religion. Because Abrahamic religions are the dominant religions of the world, and Christianity itself also includes something like 2.1 billion members, I feel that as the majority of my audience comes from Christian countries, at least predominantly Christian countries, people will know, will understand better what I'm meaning in this context. So, again, I hope that clears that up, and that nothing in particular is meant by it other than a particular origin. But nevertheless, it is an interesting point. And, well, let me know what you think about that. Next is Philip Mann, who lets me know that Leviathan, it was apparently written incorrectly in my video, and that in Hebrew they write from right to left. Quite literally, the words are written right to left, the individual letters, which is not something that I was aware of, so thank you for sharing that with me, and anybody who happens to spot your comment. That is very, very interesting. I will try to remember to make that correction when I'm doing the video on Ziz, which should be coming in the following months, hopefully, if I can organize my schedule along those lines. After that, Scientist Al-Ri, or Al-Rai, something along those lines. Sorry, I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce your name. He says that fairies could be Nephilim or genetic manipulations resulting from the technologies used by fallen angels. Which is a very interesting comment, because fairies, at least, how should I put this? One of the origins of the fairies that I found from the Middle Ages was that people explained that they were angels that were sort of left behind by God after the war in heaven. You see, after Lucifer rebelled against God, he was very suddenly cast down from heaven, and the gates, the pearly gates and whatnot, were completely shut. The angels who were sauntering about on earth at the time, doing angel things, were not able to return to heaven in time, and thus were kind of stuck. However, they weren't damned to hell because they hadn't actually done anything wrong, so they sort of ended up stuck here and became, well, fairies. So it's quite interesting to me that you happen to come across the same idea as the scholars from the Middle Ages, the religious scholars from the Middle Ages specifically, in trying to justify why these creatures existed. Obviously, the religious scholars were trying to incorporate, to a greater extent, the pagan religions into Christianity, as is wont to occur when you have any dominant cultural system trying to overcome another one, which is, again, just one of those things. Quite a interesting coincidence there. Next is Paleo News, who said that he really enjoyed the fairy video, and he asked if I can make a griffin video. Well, I'm definitely doing a griffin video. It will not be my next video, I can tell you that for sure, but I do have it higher on my list than it ought to be, considering the order of requests. Simply because this has been very, very often requested, so please do look forward to that in the coming months. I will try to have it done as soon as possible. Geordie Dyers asks for an episode about the Hydra or Kraken, and, well, I feel that I have done the Kraken to some extent in the Leviathan video, so I'm not going to put that one particularly high on my priorities. However, I will definitely try and get around to the Hydra. I'm still trying to figure out how to very quickly produce hero videos, but again, the main problem with them is that I feel that I need to explain the story to everyone, and I do want to provide some kind of commentary. Unfortunately, these stories are quite long and detailed, and commentary that I have is, also detailed, so figuring out how to present these things very quickly is rather difficult. Again, for the sake of speed, I don't want to have to spend a very long time doing the videos. One of the things that I had considered doing was purchasing a hand puppet to talk for me, which would be a little bit more expedient and a little bit more entertaining for you guys, but finding something that's appropriate, again, is not all that good. Not all that good, has not been successful, rather. So, if anybody has any ideas, do let me know. This has rather started to frustrate me, as I want to make these things for you guys, but again, time is an issue here. Next is Richie Godsoul, saying that he's looking forward to an episode about the Sphinx or Minotaur, and that he hopes that they're in the queue. And yes, sir, they are. The Sphinx has been requested a few times, so I'm going to bump that up as well. I'm not entirely sure exactly when I will have a production date for that, but it will be this year sometime, so do look forward to that. Next is Channel Pooper 169, saying that if they wanted to become a vampire, they would wear an ancient Aztec stone mask while declaring their rejection of humanity. I'm not entirely sure how you can reject your humanity outright like that. It makes me think that it would have to be some kind of Nietzsche thing, Friedrich Nietzsche thing. But at least the ancient stone Aztec mask is an interesting idea. Vampirism is not necessarily specific to human beings or living things that, like a bat or an animal, as it were. In fact, objects themselves could become vampiric in some of the older legends. However, that's a little bit lost to time. I'm not familiar with any Aztec masks granting vampirism, but I do imagine that they might give you some kind of vampiric-like curse or something or other. I'll give a look to it and maybe add it to my list of things for the vampire addendum. Again, also on the note of addendums, they are something that I do want to get around to, but they are lower on my priorities than main videos and other stuff, so just know that I am collecting information for these things in the meanwhile. After that, a rather odd comment from Garr Frankie asking to do a nipple rubbing ceremony, which I should say, I featured this comment simply because I don't have any particular problem with comments like this. I would prefer people to keep things civil, but I don't mind people expressing themselves creatively, for want of a better word. So, yeah. I did recommend that he read a book by Robert Anton Wilson, the Illuminatus trilogy. So if anybody else is interested in such things, read Robert Anton Wilson books. They're very fun, especially if you're into conspiracies and that kind of thing. Obviously, the conspiracies presented in the Robert Anton Wilson stuff are not real, and Robert has gone on to say the same himself, but he was quite interested in doing things like weaving reality with his own myth, so they're very good for that. Next is Kyle Frank with a factoid, saying that the opening quote that the narrator, myself, recites is from the 1941 Universal Pictures Wolfman. this is in relation to the werewolf video. And, yeah, I know I cheated there. It sounded fun. There was a version of it that was done for a 2000s-ish, I think maybe 2003 film called Van Helsing, where they expanded upon it and added a section related to vampires. It's very, very, very interesting. I'll probably put it up on the screen if I can find it in a reasonable amount of time. So do keep an eye out for that. The Van Helsing movie in itself is also quite fun, so I highly recommend everybody take a look at that as well. I used it in the vampire... Yeah, I think it was the vampire video or the werewolf video. I can't recall which one, but I used it in one of them. And so yeah, do take a look. Next is Ricky Stairs, saying that he was bothered when I referred to Dr. Lily as an interesting character, and that it sounded disrespectful. And I can see where you're coming from. I didn't mean any particular disrespect, but I do want to have people understand that I'm referring to his personality in this case, rather than trying to demean him by saying something diminutive like interesting character or, little chap, etc. So I hope that's understandable. Also, it was mostly the flow of the sentence that I wanted to preserve there, so I hope that makes sense as to why I chose that phrase. Not any particular disrespect meant to the gentleman, but it was the easiest way to communicate what I wanted to say. Next is the hype, saying the idea of a human being transforming into a wolf is ridiculous. Well, as you're familiar with the ideas I give in the video, it is ridiculous to transform a human being into a wolf outright. There are ways and means whereby this kind of thing can be manipulated, but generally speaking, the traditional werewolf at least is not something that is possible. Another comment by Victoria Mephistopheles, saying that the discussion that I had in the previous Cod-Past about the way that a siren functions was particularly interesting, and that they're agreeing with me that it's up to interpretation. I still haven't come to a decisive mechanism, a decisive mythological mechanism as to how a siren song would attract multiple people. But it is still something that we can each personally decide how it would work in our various interpretations of fantasy. They then also ask if I can do a video on the kappa or something else while I'm here in Japan. And on that note, I do have a plan to go to a shrine nearby where I stay to do a video on a woman who transformed into a giant snake dragon thing. Apparently she is popular in some or other anime, but I'm not particularly familiar with it. If I look it up, you probably don't notice, but I paused the audio recording there. Apparently it's Fate's Day Night. I do recall seeing this anime a long time ago. This seems to be a newer rendition of that. Again, I'm not particularly familiar, so I'll see what I can manage. Alciona says about the behemoth, why not a giant ape? Well, I guess it could be an ape. The majority of the interpretations that we see about the behemoth is that it is probably going to be some kind of elephant, but an ape could possibly work. I don't think people were familiar with gorillas and stuff like that in the ancient Middle East. I recall... who was it? One of the ancient Roman historians spoke about soldiers going somewhere into Africa, a little bit further than Romans usually did, and they described hairy troglodytes, which they thought were human beings, and we have, subsequent to that, interpreted it as gorillas. Now, I say I don't rightly recall, because this was a while ago, and it was when I was in university, and it was a very particular footnote that I remember reading, and I cannot seem to find it with a quick search over here, so I'll get back to you on that. But generally speaking, I don't think that the Middle East had access to gorillas. However, you could definitely justify the behemoth as a gorilla if you so chose to do so. There's really nothing stopping you in that case, although I don't imagine gorillas eat trees. Oh well. And with that, we're done with the comments. I hope that was at least somewhat informative, and I hope that those of you who were featured enjoyed the responses. Please let me know if there's anything else you'd like me to say. Anyway, after that, getting on to video discussion. The fairy video was a particularly interesting video to do. As I mentioned before, the structure of the video was rather odd, because it necessarily needed me to present the history of the fairy before actually speaking about the myth, but I didn't want to change up my scheme just for this. I will probably need to change the structure of my videos, because they don't seem to hold people's attention long enough to the, at least what I consider to be the interesting parts, which are the final 2 sections, so I will have to think of some way to change them up. But for now, it was an interesting challenge trying to follow my usual formula, whilst also having this rather pressing need to present the history first, rather than the actual myth. And again, this is simply because people are familiar with fairies as being pixies and sprites rather than elves, gnomes, dwarves, etc. In this video, although it is not particularly visible, I did improve a lot of minor technical things in the background. Things like some of the color grading and some of the audio was mixed a lot more smoothly, I think. You'll also notice that I used audio ducking a lot more vigorously in this video, which I'm not entirely sure came out all that well. I'll need to fiddle with the settings to see if I can find something that I like. But for the most part, I think this video was technically a big improvement, at least again for the background stuff. A lot of the things you guys may not notice, but so long as nothing broke on the viewer's end, that's the idea, to improve things in the background and eventually smooth out my production process. I've already done a lot of smoothing out and speeding up of the production of these. In fact, I was able to produce the fairy video had I worked flat out on it, I would have been able to produce it within a few days, which is a lot better than the few weeks that I usually take to make these things. So if I can keep up that kind of pace, I can make a few more videos for you guys, hopefully in a shorter time. Although on that note, I do hope to do a lot more tea ceremony videos, and hopefully with this will come a few more video techniques and tricks that you guys might enjoy. One thing that I didn't do for the most recent tea ceremony video was that I did not apply any kind of color grading to it, and I really should have. Probably your standard orange and teal kind of grading technique, just to make it seem a little bit more vibrant. I might actually upload a version of that is unmonetized and see how people respond to it, or I might just leave that to the Patreon kind of stuff. Let's see how it goes. In the meanwhile though, please do look forward to more tea ceremony videos and other additional stuff that I'm doing on the side. For the record, I don't actually charge for those on the Patreon, and in fact I don't want to charge in general more than once a month, because I do feel that a lot of people are expecting only one payment. Moreover, I don't have the Patreon set as a monthly payment system, because there are months where I'm unable to produce anything, and as a result I don't feel that I deserve any kind of transaction on your part. Therefore I have it set up to a per production charge, but I only really charge for the Beastiary videos. In addition to that, the Beastiary videos are presently set to a week's delay. I may have to change how this offer functions, but generally speaking, the people who give me $5 get the videos a week in advance. I'm not sure that that's a good idea, considering that I'm already rather slow to produce these things as it is, but I'll see how it goes, and we can come to some kind of arrangement there. And as for future videos, please look forward to more tea ceremony videos, please look forward to more Beastiary videos. The next video that I'm going to be releasing is The Witch. The reason for this is because I feel that I need to address magic in general. I didn't want to talk about magic during the fairy video because, well, magic is its own, ball game, as it were, which is only separated from normal human beings by the fact that they can perform magic. Generally, though, I am going to be speaking about wizards and warlocks, etc., but it will be the witch video. What puts this video at a higher priority than usual, as well as in addition to the magic discussion, is that, I kind of have an obligation to the people on Patreon to do what they want. So, although the fairy was not a particular request by any of them, it was a general request as a response to the Krampus video, I do generally want to try and add a little bit more to the rewards that I am offering the people on Patreon. So this is one of the sort of unspoken things that I do try insofar as possible to give their requests a bit more priority. However, things like the Griffin, which is not requested by any particular person on Patreon, is something that I'm probably going to do after the Witch. At least that's how I've set up my schedule. Otherwise, there's nothing else in particular to talk about, and that's the end of the video. I hope you guys enjoyed that, and let me know what you think down in the comments below, or if there's anything else you want to discuss. Just as a side note, in the tea ceremony video, I spoke with one of my patrons, and she was a little bit concerned that she might bother me with frequent messaging. I should say that as much as possible I try to reply to people's messages, and I really do enjoy seeing your messages at the bottom of my videos and general comments and discussions. I'm really happy to engage with you guys in discussions. I may not always have anything to say though, but I will try to at least find something to say. So please, if you guys have anything you want to talk about in these videos, let me know. Otherwise, thank you so much for listening. Hope you had a good, relaxing, time, and please enjoy.